Hello fellow YouTubers, and welcome to episode 10, reading my first self-published novel, Aggravation. Yes, I decided to continue with the readings. After much deliberation, I figured I added to those few who are truly interested in what's going to happen, and who have followed the episodes from the very beginning. Running his fingers through his hair, he then gripped the headrest and stared at the ceiling, although he wasn't seeking divine guidance, but rather because his eyes simply fixed on it. And as he continued to stare, he had a thought that instantly erased all others. I wonder how long Henrietta was dead before anyone found her. God knows, the poor soul. And I wonder who found her. Couldn't have been what's-his-name next door. Otherwise he would have said so. And he'd be damn sure it wasn't Mouth Almighty across the road, because he wouldn't be backward in coming forward about something like that. No way. So who did? And what made them come a-calling in the first place? Beats the shit out of me. Maybe Dr. Saunders knows. Certainly won't hurt to ask. For a couple of minutes he continued to stare at the ceiling, and probably would have continued to do so had he not realised the printer had stopped whirring. Gathering up the pages, he then separated them into two separate lots of 15, saying, "Wait till Sandy reads this lot. He'll shit himself, he will." Why, I can just hear him now going on and on and on, particularly about the bowler hat and the pyramid, saying it's the most ridiculous thing he has ever heard, and that it's impossible for one solid object to pass through another, and that the sisters must have been seeing things, or they were totally nuts, rather than just loony, as he always thought they were. And what will he say if I tell him we'll have to burn the remains of their father in order for the sisters to pass over? What then, eh? Probably say what I did, and just as loud too. And who could blame him? Not that I'm giving serious thought to doing it, but it'd be interesting to hear what he has to say nonetheless. He was tempted to stroll over to Sandy's house and give him the printout now, but he decided not to. It was 10 after 5 and Sandy and Alma were probably close to sitting for dinner, and he didn't want to impose, even though he was sure they wouldn't look upon his arrival as such. And he was tired, hungry too, so he'd be better off using that time to prepare a meal, then sit down, relax, and maybe watch a movie. But he didn't come close to watching a movie. After a quick and easy meal of 2 toasted cheese, tomato and onion sandwiches, 2 mugs of tea, a shower, he placed his packed suitcase under the bed, returned the money to the drawer, then lay down on the bed to stretch out and relax with no thought of sleep. But sleep he did, like the proverbial log. Awaking to find himself still wearing his dressing gown and lying on top of the covers, he thought he must have napped, only to realise when he glanced at the clock that it was 7:45, and the AM to boot. Bloody hell! What happened to last night, he yawned. After yawning again, he flipped onto his right side, then stretched his legs, and that's when his right calf muscle knotted, the pain so intense that he clamped his eyes closed, screamed through clenched teeth, "Oh fucking hell!" and shot bolt upright and gripped the knot with both hands, all at the same time. "Shit, shit, shit," he grimaced as he sat doubled over, not daring to release his grip as he tensed his toes, the one and only way to help alleviate the agony. Minutes later he was comfortable enough to release his grip, mindful that, with the muscle relaxed but now fibrillating, he had to tread wisely or suffer a repeat performance. God damn it. Hobbling to the ensuite, where there was a tube of deep heat salve in the shaving medicine cabinet, he wasted no time in squirting a decent glob onto the palm of his right hand. bending low from the waist then and rubbing the salve vigorously into the skin of the affected area, safe in the knowledge from such past experience that relief would come quickly, although he'd be limping for most of the day. Back in the bedroom, he discarded his dressing gown to fully reveal the clothes he wore underneath, glad at least for one small mercy. After showering last night, he thought for a moment to dress in pyjamas, but a moment later he opted for clothes instead, just in case. He was then, and was still, nervous from the event of yesterday. Maybe he always would be. By the time he finished his breakfast and washed up, it was 8:25. Still 2 hours 20 to his doctor's appointment. More than enough time to limp his way to Sandy's. His leg too tender to risk driving. And maybe sit around for a while, drinking tea while Sandy read the sister's writings, after which he could limp his way into town. With his mind made up, he went to his office and gathered the printout, checked to see if the front door was locked. It was. Then headed to, then out the back door, pulling it closed behind his back but not bothering to lock it. Then made his way to the rear lane. Be damned, he was going to run the risk of being spotted by Charlie. 10 minutes later, Sandy greeted him at the front door. "Hey, Clyde, morning," he said with a smile. "Morning, Sandy. Got the sister's writings printed out for you, so I thought, that's good, Clyde, come on in. Alma just made a fresh pot of tea. Must have known you were coming." In the kitchen, Sandy said, "Look who's here, Alma." "Morning, Alma," Clyde said. Alma reminded Clyde of the Golden Girl star B. Arthur. Very much so. "And good morning to you too, Clyde. You well?" "Yes, thank you. And you?" "I'm good, real good." Then, "You got something wrong with your right leg, Clyde? I noticed you limping." "Had a cramp earlier, that's all." "Sit yourself down," Sandy said. "I know what it's like to get them leg cramps, don't I, Alma?" Alma grinned and said, "Jumps around so much he does, you'd swear blind someone was sticking pins in his backside." "Hey, easy on there, Alma. I ain't that bad. Am I?" "Uh-huh." Sandy looked at Clyde, smiled and said, "What does she know? Anyhow, so that's the sister's writings you got there, eh? Can't wait to read it." "It's all yours," Clyde said, passing the printout to him. "Makes for some interesting reading, it does." Alma said, "You got time for a cup of tea, Clyde? Or are you in a hurry?" Clyde smiled. "Always got time for a cup of tea, Alma. Thank you." "So what's this I hear about you and mine going camping?" Alma asked, pouring tea. "Oh, Sandy asked if I'd been camping before, and I said I hadn't. So he suggested we should. Said it'd be a change for being cooped up in the house, and I agreed it would be." "His house or your house?" Alma asked jokingly. "Of course it'd be his house, Alma." Sandy shot back light-heartedly. "You know I'm as happy as a pig in mud living in this house." "I certainly hope so," Alma replied, then winked at Clyde. During the next hour, Sandy read in between comments and replies to the talk going on around him. Alma was surprised that Clyde had ever been camping before, and had politely asked why. Clyde telling her that his parents were never interested in such things, going on to say that the vast majority of people who lived in and about Sydney during his years as a boy and young adult rarely if ever ventured away from their surroundings from one year to the next. It's just the way it was, and it was true. She had then praised her husband for the bushman he was, much to Sandy's embarrassment, adding that he couldn't have anyone better to take him away for his first camping trip. It was obvious to Clyde that she and Sandy had a solid relationship built on love and respect for each other, and for that he was envious. Leaving Sandy to his reading, Clyde thanked he and Alma for their hospitality, Sandy saying he'd pop on over later in the afternoon to talk about their upcoming trip away. It was 9:40 when Clyde set off for the town. Plenty of time to walk the 500 metres to the doctor's surgery in Lister Street, even for a man who was favouring one leg. In fact, he would probably reach the surgery in no more than 20 minutes, leaving a 45-minute gap before his scheduled appointment, time he decided he would use to go to the supermarket to buy 3 bottles of weed and feed. And being a Thursday, Louise would be in the cafe by now, so he might as well drop by to ask her for her website address, something he had forgotten to ask for and she hadn't volunteered when she delivered his bust. Maybe she hadn't had a website by that time, therefore not being able to give what she didn't have. She may not even have one by now, knowing from past experience how awkward it can be to do so. That and registering an email address too. When Clyde went to register his address 11 years ago, he had thought it would be a simple matter of using his name. After all, how many Clyde Finneymores could there possibly be? But when he tried and failed to have his name accepted, it was patently obvious that there was at least one other with the exact same name, which had surprised him. His email address is Clyde Finneymore, author publisher @gmail.com, with the 2 words author and publisher making all the difference. If they hadn't, then he would have been amazed to find that there was 2 of him. Entering the cafe, Louise greeted him with a radiant smile and, "Hello, Clyde," saying after his inquiry that she was still in the process of setting up a website and would let him know as soon as she had done so. With the cafe well patronised, he knew that Louise would be busy, so after saying how much he was looking forward to logging onto her site, he bid her goodbye and departed. Diagonally across the street from the cafe entrance was the supermarket, but unfortunately, and much to Clyde's dismay, he spotted Charlie Jessup standing close to with his back to the main display window of the supermarket, his head in constant motion. "Shit," Clyde grumbled. "Can't escape the man no matter what I do or where I go, God damn it." Glancing at his watch, 1/2 an hour, he muttered. "Well, I'm not standing around here waiting for him to go," he thought, "so I might as well amble to the surgery and come back later. Blasted shit of a man." But as he turned to walk away, he thought, "No, be damned if I'm going to let that man dictate my life." And with that, and ignoring his still tender leg, like a man with a mission would do, Clyde Power walked his way across Castle Street, gained the footpath, heard Charlie yell, "Hey Clyde! Hey Clyde!" replied without missing a stride, "Hey Charlie! See you later, Charlie," then was gone before Charlie had a chance to say another word. And by God, but that felt good, he thought, entering the supermarket. Too bad my leg doesn't feel the same way. Still, it was a small price to pay. Favouring his left leg more now than ever before, Clyde slowly made his way to the far end of the store. But of course, to aisle 10 where the gardening products were shelved, along with insecticide repellent, baits and poisons. And again, of course, when he reached aisle 10, he wasn't surprised to see that those shelves were located at the far end. And he thought, this looks like being one of those days. 5 minutes later, he was standing at checkout 4 behind a woman that, if her silver hair was any indication, was elderly, perhaps even ancient. With the young woman in front of her now gone, the checkout operator, Mrs. Alderman, who reminded Clyde of Judge Judy, began to pass what few items there were by the scanner, placing the lot in one plastic bag, then said, "That comes to $12.47, Mrs. Carmichael," to which said instantly began to pluck gold coins from her purse in ultra slow motion. Clyde, growing impatient, looked at the 3 remaining checkouts, finding, but of course, they were closed. Supermarket aisles and checkouts, Clyde thought dismally, are 2 on the long list of life's aggravations. By the time he once again focused his attention to what was unfolding before him, the gold coins had been replaced by those of silver, prompting Clyde to think, thank Christ copper coins are a thing of the past. He was tempted to hand a $20 note to Mrs. Alderman to pay for the lot and tell her to give the change to the old woman. But if he did that, there was every chance the old woman would want to thank him, and if she spoke as slowly as she handed out the change, he wouldn't be able to get away from her. So he erred on the side of common sense and all reason and decided not to. But just when he thought, with the placing of what he thought was the last coin onto the pile that already occupied Mrs. Alderman's outstretched cupped hands, his waiting all but over, Mrs. Alderman noticed it was a button and not a coin. And that's when the old lady became confused, and when Clyde almost cried from the frustration of it all. So with enough being enough, Clyde dropped a 20-cent piece onto the pile, smiled. Mrs. Alderman reciprocated. The old lady took her receipt, picked up the bag, then slowly shuffled away, leaving the button behind and obviously totally oblivious to what had just transpired. She's an old coot, she is, Mrs. Alderman said to Clyde. One of the wealthiest women in the Shire, yet still she persists in using change for any and all of her purchases. Is there a reason she does that? Clyde asked, a little intrigued. Oh yes, very much so. You see, when she makes a withdrawal from the credit union, she always insists on $1 and $2 coins for whatever amount it is she wants. Gee, how strange. Yes, and rumour has it that during the last 10 years she's been regularly withdrawing large amounts of those 2 coins and stashing them away. Clyde pursed his lips and nodded, then said, Does she realise what she's doing? You know, sound of mine? I'm not sure. Maybe, maybe not. But she's still got a twinkle in her eye. I know that. So I guess that has to account for something. Yes, I suppose so, Clyde said, handing over a $50 note. After pocketing his change and receipt, he said goodbye as he picked up his bag and limped away, thinking, I wonder if the sisters did the same thing. Possibly. After all, they were, by their own admission, different, and they were reclusive and hoarders, so it makes perfect sense, to their way of thinking, to have their inherited wealth in the house with them. Yes, perfect sense. So if that's the case, where did they hide it? Yes, well, that's the $64,000 question, isn't it? Where? He was still thinking about that when he drew level with the front gate to the house that was the doctor's surgery. Rose Cottage, the house was called. A fitting name considering the plethora of rose gardens, but not original by any stretch of the imagination. Closing the front gate behind him, he couldn't help but admire the house as he made the short way to the front veranda. From past research, he recognised the style as being Federation bungalow, the extended roof of the house covering the open veranda, and the absence of parapets and brick columns testimony to that. Stepping into the shade the veranda provided, he couldn't help but notice a marked drop in temperature, and where the breeze that now cooled the sweat on his brow came from, he didn't know. Out in the open there hadn't been the slightest hint of a breeze, and with the sky clear the sun had had a bite to it. But here in the shade, all of that had been quickly forgotten. Stepping through the front door, he immediately entered the reception waiting area, that at one time may have been a lounge or sitting room, before the wall had been removed to open it up. And is always the way when you first step into such an area. All eyes focus on you for several seconds, as if sizing you up. Then, satisfied or not, give a damn, those eyes look down at whatever they were you seeing before your sudden appearance. Directly ahead was a reception counter, and at first Clyde thought it was unattended, but as he made his way toward it, he noticed a mop of curly hair that quickly became a forehead, that in no time at all became a face. Good morning, sir, the face said. How may I help you? She reminded Clyde of Miss Piggy, but without the attitude and the snout. Her face was heavily made up, but couldn't hide her red cheeks, her jowls more like it. She seemed to have no eyebrows above what Clyde expected would be narrow eyes, had she not been in the habit, as she was now, of opening them wide, probably to prevent the loose flesh of her lids from rendering her sightless. Perched on the top of a tiny nose was a pair of frameless glasses, below which was a mouth so small that Clyde wondered how it was possible for her to take in the enormous amount of food she obviously had, and relished to achieve her massive bulk. So large she was that it was impossible to tell if she was seated on a chair, 2 chairs, a bale of straw, or a couple of bags of wheat, for all Clyde knew. "Good morning, Clyde Phillimore. I have a 10:45 at Dr. Saunders." "Have you been to see Dr. Saunders before, Mr. Phillimore?" "No." "I see." Handing Clyde a clipboard which rested on a single white form, she said, "Would you be kind enough to fill this out, please? Then take a seat. Doctor shouldn't be long." She was, with those 2 statements, Clyde reckoned, either an optimist or she knew something that he didn't, for there wasn't a vacant chair to be seen in the waiting area, and with 10:45 8 minutes away, there was no way in the world he'd get to see Dr. Saunders by the appointed time, which only went to bolster his conviction that you might as well take a number for all the good making an appointment does for you. So he stood like a shag on a rock, close to the wall not far from the door jamb of the door to Dr. Saunders' surgery, filling out the form and noticing as he did so the furtive glances he was getting from the other patients. To be expected, he supposed. After all, he was the new kid on the block, a stranger in town. By the time he completed filling in the form, part of which had had him searching his memory banks, a chair became vacant, and after giving the filled-in form to Miss Piggy, he seated himself next to an old man reading Tolstoy's War and Peace, no less. Clyde wondered if the thick tone was indicative of how long he'd have to wait. Perhaps the old man had aged while waiting. It wouldn't surprise me in the least, he thought sarcastically. For the next half hour he watched as chairs became empty, only to have another occupant in no time at all. The people coming and going with such monotonous regularity, he couldn't understand why any doctor wouldn't want to take up practice in a small country town. Why, if this was anything to go by, there was a fortune to be made in the bush. And with a small amount of time half of the patients spent in the 2 surgeries, they were obviously only renewing prescriptions, so half the time it was easy money. Yet it was common knowledge that many small country towns were virtually begging for a resident doctor, often going to extraordinary lengths to procure the services of one, offering free housing, guaranteed minimum 6-figure incomes, and God knows what else. It just doesn't make sense. 15 minutes later, 45 in all, Clyde was politely summoned to Dr. Saunders' surgery, leaving the still waiting old man to his book, of which a page hadn't been turned since Clyde sat beside him. Clyde expected he was sleeping, but then he could be dead. Dr. Saunders held open the surgery door, allowing Clyde to enter unencumbered, closing the door then shaking Clyde's hand, both men seating themselves then. Dr. Saunders reminded Clyde of former US President George Bush Sr., his short-cropped hair more salt than pepper, ears large and prominent, his face slightly tanned and clean-shaven, wrinkled but not wizened, eyes brown, teeth yellowish behind lean lips, and an upturned nose that permanently displayed large nostrils and was a little off-putting to Clyde's mind. "So, Mr. Phillimore, how may I help you?" Dr. Saunders inquired. Clyde went on to tell him of the 2 episodes of lost time, going on to say that, as a writer who is familiar with the term fugue, and he had sought more information from Google about the condition. Dr. Saunders smiling, then saying how often some of his patients came to him after self-diagnosis courtesy of the World Wide Web. He did, however, admit that it was possible Clyde was experiencing fugue states, but what the cause was up to him to find out. Clyde was certain it was because of recent events, but he wasn't about to reveal anything about those happenings to the doctor. After checking Clyde's blood pressure and finding it normal, he then asked if Clyde had or was still experiencing stress, Clyde telling of his recent move from the city but nothing else. Dr. Saunders then asked if Clyde drank and smoked. Happy to hear that he did neither, although Clyde thought the doctor was hypocritical to say that, considering it was, from the slight nicotine stains on the fore and middle fingers of his right hand, obviously that he smoked himself. Following a line of questions regarding Clyde's past health, illnesses, injuries and hospitalisations, all of which Clyde was forthcoming but without elaborating, Dr. Saunders wrote two referrals, one for Clyde to have a blood workup, the second for an MIR scan just to be sure there was nothing untoward in his brain, the latter only being available in Dubbo. With the ending of the consultation, Clyde asked, as he had planned, if Dr. Saunders knew who had found the body of Henrietta MacArthur, the question evidently not totally unexpected. I notice your address on the form, Mr. Phillimore, and for that reason only I will tell you. It was me. You see, I was their doctor during their later years following Dr. Bellow's retirement in 1973. And as those years progressed and the sisters became a little fragile, I made a habit of phoning them once a fortnight. That would later become once a week. And when Harriet passed away and Henrietta was by herself, I phoned every other day, always patient as the phone continued to ring, knowing she was not as mobile as she once was. But when my first call rang out, I dialed again. And when the same thing happened, I knew that all was not as it should be. Standing, Clyde offers his right hand to Dr. Saunders, who didn't hesitate shaking it, saying, "Thank you, Doctor." To which Dr. Saunders smiled, nodded, then said, "From what you've told me, and with what I've seen of you today, I doubt if anything will come of those tests, but it's always better not to leave any stone unturned just in case." "Of course," Clyde replied. Letting himself out of the surgery, he noticed that the old man was still seated, seemingly not to have moved since he had left his side. And being a curious individual, he just had to ask Miss Piggy. "Excuse me," he said in a hushed tone, "but that old man over there, he's been there longer than I was, and I was wondering if he's all right." Without looking, she replied, "Oh, that's Mr. Avery. He's been coming in here and sitting in that exact same chair one day a week for the past 2 years. Reckons the house was too quiet since his wife passed away." "And no one here minds?" "Why should we mind?" "Why indeed," Clyde thought. Then, "Thank you, he almost said Piggy. "Thank you." Outside, the once clear sky was now cloudy, although the clouds promised nothing more than a lowering of the temperature. In fact, it was notably cooler as he commenced his return journey home. And as he walked, he thought, where would I stash a lot of money? Would I put it in a strong box and bury it underground? Or would I place it under the house or in the roof cavity? Underground could be a bit iffy, though even if it's wrapped in greaseproof paper, there'd be a chance of it becoming wet, or at least damp and mildewy. But then it wouldn't matter if the sister didn't plan on using it, just as long as it was out of sight but still close. Under the house or in the roof cavity would be my choice. Thinking rationally, of course. But that's the problem, isn't it? So not thinking rationally, where would I put it? But hang on a minute before you go thinking crazy things. Who's to say they did close their credit union or bank account and do that? Nobody but me, and even then it's a maybe. And there's no way to find out one way or the other, is there? No. Bank, credit union won't divulge such information, and there's no way the solicitor will either. Yeah, but be that as it may, let's say they did that, then hid it. Where would two dotty minds put it? Come on, Clyde. Just imagine you're a little eccentric, and you're sitting at the kitchen table, or in the lounge room, or sitting room, or maybe sitting up in bed, and right before your eyes is a fortune in cold hard cash. Where do you decide to put it? Wall cavity makes sense. Knock out a few bricks and Bob's your uncle. Yeah, okay. Anywhere else? Well, I suppose in an item of furniture. But the only trouble with that is that the sisters knew the furniture would be taken away once they died. The only other option would be put it in something that was a permanent fixture, like the slow combustion stove, the kitchen unit, kitchen cupboards, behind the laundry tubs, somewhere in the old bathroom. Reaching the corner of Lister and Turpentine Streets and Albert home, the idea of the slow combustion stove being the hiding place dismissed a few minutes ago because of obvious reasons now seemed plausible because of the gas stove the sisters had installed some time ago. Dotty as they may have been, there would have been no way they would light the stove if the money was hidden inside, nor would there be any reason for them to do so with the gas one next to it. There was a possibility that demanded inspection as soon as he arrived home, and if it turned out to be a no-go, so be it. There were other options available to him. In the kitchen, the jug chattering away, Clyde stood before the old stove, torch in one hand, a bread knife in the other. Before searching the stove, he had decided to wrap the flue with the spine of the knife, just to make sure it was hollow. For who knows what the sisters were thinking. But after a minute of wrapping and listening with intent, he was certain the flue contained nothing but soot. Placing the knife on the bench top, he then turned on the torch. It bent low from the waist. Opened the door to the firebox and peered inside. Nothing. Remaining crouched, he took one step to his right. Opened the oven door. But again, there was nothing. Well, I think that episode's long enough. We'll have to wait for episode 11. I want to thank you for watching. Can you hear the frog? It's a big green tree frog. Really noisy. Anyhow, I want to thank you for watching. And until next time, bye for now.